Have you ever walked away from a conversation thinking, why did I let that person get under my skin? Maybe it was a rude comment, a passive, aggressive coworker, or just someone who knows how to push your buttons. We've all been there. But what if I told you, you can train your mind to never feel angry or bothered by anyone ever again? Have you ever had one of those moments where someone says something, maybe a bit sharp, maybe just careless, and it just stays with you? You're driving home, replaying the words over and over again in your head. You think of what you should have said, what you wish you'd said. You feel that tightness in your chest. You get home, and even though the moment is long gone, it's still with you. You're shorter with your kids, distant with your spouse, distracted from what actually matters. And the truth is, most of us don't even realize how much emotional space we've given away to people who didn't earn it. This isn't about being weak. It's not about being overly sensitive. It's about being human. We're wired to respond. Our brains are constantly scanning for threat, for disrespect, for rejection. And when something feels off, even just a tone, a glance, a silence, we pick up on it. It's like our inner alarm system goes off, and suddenly we're not in control anymore. Our emotions are. The problem isn't that we get upset. The problem is that we stay upset. Let me ask you this. How many times have you let someone live in your head rent free? How many hours have you lost thinking about what someone said, what they didn't say, how they made you feel? Most of the time, they've moved on. They're not thinking about it. But you are. You're carrying it. You're the one still hurting, still angry, still bothered. It happens to all of us. A coworker talks down to you in a meeting. A friend makes a passive-aggressive comment. A stranger online says something unkind. In the moment, maybe you don't react. Maybe you keep your cool. But it doesn't end there. It festers. It brews. And before you know it, that one interaction has taken over your day. We don't talk enough about the emotional cost of holding on offense. We spend time managing tasks, managing people, managing money, but how often do we manage our reactions, not suppress them? Not fake a smile and shove the emotion down. I'm talking about regulating them, taking ownership of what's happening inside of us, even when what's happening outside is completely out of our control. Because the truth is, most of the time, it's not about the person in front of us. It's not even about what they said. It's about the meaning we attach to it. Someone doesn't return your call and you tell yourself they're ignoring you. Someone makes a joke at your expense and you take it as an attack. Someone criticizes your work and you hear that you're not good enough. But what if that wasn't their intent? What if it wasn't even about you? That's a hard pill to swallow, because it means we have to stop blaming other people for how we feel. We have to take responsibility for the stories we're telling ourselves. And that kind of awareness, it takes practice. It takes maturity. It takes emotional strength. But once you start to build that muscle, everything changes. Let me tell you about someone I worked with a while back. Let's call him Aaron. Aaron was sharp, smart guy, successful, driven, the kind of person people respected in the boardroom. But he had a short fuse, not in a loud, yelling kind of way. His fuse showed up in silence, withdrawal, that cold edge in his tone when he felt disrespected. And it happened often, almost weekly. Someone would disagree with him, and it was like a switch flipped. He'd shut down, disengage, hold on to that resentment like it was currency. Eventually, it started to wear on his team. People were afraid to give him feedback. He could feel the distance growing, both professionally and personally. And he didn't know how to fix it. He came to me and said, I don't know what's wrong with me. I know I'm not supposed to take things personally, but I can't help it. I feel like people are constantly trying to get under my skin. We unpacked that. And here's what we found. It wasn't that people were attacking him. It was that his past experiences had trained him to expect it. He'd been burned before by a boss who micromanaged, by a friend who betrayed his trust, by a parent who was overly critical. So every time he got feedback, every time someone questioned him, it wasn't just about that moment. It was about all those old wounds being reopened. That's the tricky part about emotional triggers. They rarely show up as big, dramatic moments. They show up in small, subtle ways. A tone, a pause, a word, And suddenly you're not just reacting to this person. You're reacting to 5 other people from 5 years ago. But here's the breakthrough. Once Aaron could see that clearly, he could separate his story from their behavior. He started pausing in the moment, noticing what was happening inside of him, asking himself, is this about now or is this about then? And that one question, it changed everything. Because when you can pause, when you can bring awareness into the moment, you buy yourself space. And in that space, you get to choose. You get to choose not to snap back. You get to choose not to spiral. You get to choose not to carry someone else's immaturity into your own mental and emotional state. One of the most powerful things we can learn is this: not everything deserves a reaction. Just because someone hands you an insult doesn't mean you have to accept it. Just because someone brings chaos doesn't mean you have to invite it in. You can acknowledge the moment without absorbing it. And when you do that consistently, when you start to build that emotional buffer, you begin to realize just how much power you actually have. Power not in controlling other people, but in mastering your response to them. That's where true calm comes from. Not from living a life free of conflict, but from being unshakable in the conflict. Here's something else Aaron learned, something we all have to come to terms with. Not everyone is going to meet you with kindness. Not everyone is going to communicate well. Some people are going to be rude. Some will be careless. Some will be insecure, and that insecurity will show up as arrogance or manipulation or judgment. But their behavior, that's about them, not you. Your job is not to absorb their energy. Your job is to protect your peace. And protecting your peace doesn't mean avoiding people. It means learning how to engage without being entangled. It means building the skill of neutrality, not in a passive way, but in a powerful way. A way that says, I see what you're doing, but I don't have to match your energy. I can stay steady. That kind of emotional strength, it doesn't come from pretending you don't care. It comes from caring deeply, but wisely. Knowing where to invest your emotions, knowing when to lean in and when to let go. And most importantly, knowing that your inner world is your responsibility, no one else's. It's easy to say, they made me mad. They ruined my day. They triggered me. But that language gives away your power. You're not a victim of someone else's behavior. You are the gatekeeper of your emotional state. And the moment you realize that, the moment you stop outsourcing your peace to other people, you become untouchable. That doesn't mean you'll never feel anger again. Anger is a natural emotion. It's a signal that something feels off. But it doesn't have to control you. It doesn't have to dictate your next move. You can feel the emotion and still choose the response. That's emotional intelligence. That's real maturity. And that's where freedom lies. Think back to the last time you felt angry or bothered. What if in that moment you had paused for just 5 seconds? What if you had asked yourself, what's the story I'm telling myself about this? What if you had remembered that this person's words do not define you, that their behavior says more about them than it does about you? Imagine how different your day would have gone, how different your relationships would feel, how much lighter you'd carry yourself. That's the work. Not easy, but worth it. Because the more you practice this, the more peace you protect. And the more peace you protect, the more power you step into. Not over others, but over yourself. And once you taste that kind of emotional freedom, you'll never want to give it up. Most people don't realize how automatic their reactions are. Something happens. Someone says something rude, does something careless, and before they've even had a second to think, they've already reacted. Raised their voice, shut down, sent the angry message, played out the argument in their head a dozen times. They're not responding, they're repeating. Old habits, old stories, old patterns. And it feels normal, it feels justified, but normal doesn't always mean healthy, and justified doesn't always mean helpful. It's easy to think, well, if they hadn't said that, I wouldn't be mad. Or, if they just treat me with respect, I'd be fine. But that mindset puts your emotional well-being in someone else's hands. And the truth is, if your peace depends on someone else behaving perfectly, you'll never be at peace. Because people won't always say the right thing. They won't always show up the way you want them to. They won't always be thoughtful or kind or even self-aware. That's reality. That's life. So the question isn't how to make other people less frustrating. The question is, how do you become less reactive? How do you stay calm, steady, grounded, even when other people aren't? It starts with understanding the difference between a trigger and a response. A trigger is external. It's the email, it's the tone, the glance, the interruption, the thing someone else does. You don't always control the trigger, but you always control the response. And the response is what determines your outcome, not the trigger. The trigger might start the fire, but it's your response that decides whether it burns the house down or just flickers and fades. That space between what happens and what you do next, that's where your power lies. And the first step to claiming that power is to create a pause point. Most people skip this. They go from moment to meltdown in seconds. But if you can give yourself even just a few seconds of awareness before you react, you change the whole dynamic. Someone says something offensive, pause. Someone questions your ability, pause. Someone gets under your skin, pause. How? That pause doesn't have to be long, 3 seconds. That's all it takes. Long enough to take a breath. Long enough to notice the tension rising. Long enough to ask yourself, is this how I want to show up? Because that's the real goal. Not to win the moment. Not to get the last word. How? But to show up in a way that aligns with who you want to be, calm, clear, controlled. It's not about being passive. It's about being powerful because you're choosing, not reacting. That pause gives your brain a chance to shift from emotional autopilot to conscious choice. It moves you out of fight or flight and into presence. And the more you practice it, the easier it becomes. It's like building a muscle. At first, it feels awkward. But over time, it becomes part of who you are. The second key is to practice emotional distance. Most people treat every situation like it's personal. How every disagreement feels like an attack. Every slight feels like rejection. But what if you didn't take it personally? What if you could see someone's behavior as a reflection of them, not a reflection of you? Think about it this way. If someone threw a ball at you, how? You don't have to catch it. You can let it bounce. You can watch it roll by. Not every comment needs a comeback. Not every insult deserves your energy. How? Not every argument requires your participation. You start to develop this distance when you stop absorbing everything. How? Just because someone says it doesn't mean it's true. Just because someone believes it doesn't mean you have to. You can hear them without holding it. You can observe without absorbing. And when you do that, you free yourself from the emotional weight of other people's projections. It's not always easy, especially when it's someone close to you, a parent, a partner, a colleague you respect. But here's the thing. Your emotional peace isn't just about who's right, how it's about what's healthy. And sometimes what's healthy is stepping back far enough to see the full picture. Their words, their reactions, how their tone. That's their lens. That's their internal world being projected onto the external one. You don't have to carry it. Emotional distance doesn't mean emotional disconnection. It means staying close to your values while staying separate from someone else's dysfunction. How? It means being able to say, I see what's happening here, and I'm not going to match that energy. I'm going to hold my ground. That's strength. The third shift is choosing to assume neutral intent. This one takes practice. Because our brains are wired to assume the worst. It's a defense mechanism, a way to stay alert, stay protected, stay safe. But in modern life, that instinct often works against us. It turns a mistext into a personal slight, how a direct tone into an accusation, a moment of silence into rejection. And suddenly we're reacting to a story we wrote in our heads, not the reality in front of us. Assuming neutral intent doesn't mean pretending people are always kind. It means giving them the benefit of the doubt unless they've proven otherwise. It means asking, what else could this mean? Maybe they were rushed. Maybe they're stressed. Maybe they weren't thinking. Maybe it wasn't about you at all. How? You won't always be right, but you'll be calmer. And that calm gives you clarity. Clarity gives you perspective. How? And perspective helps you respond in a way that you won't regret 5 minutes or 5 years from now. Think about a time someone said something that felt off. You jumped to a conclusion. You got defensive. Maybe you responded in anger. And later, you found out it wasn't what you thought. They weren't trying to found. How? They weren't even aware. And you were left feeling embarrassed, frustrated, maybe even ashamed. That's the cost of assumptions. They rob us of peace before the facts even show up. When you start assuming neutral intent, you stop rushing to judgment. You start creating room for curiosity. How instead of reacting, you can ask, hey, can you clarify what you meant by that? Or, that didn't land well. Was that your intention? These kinds of questions de-escalate tension before it turns into conflict. They allow for understanding before anger takes the wheel. None of these shifts are complicated, but they require practice. They require patience. They require emotional discipline. And the more you apply them, pausing before reacting, practicing emotional distance, assuming neutral intent, the more you'll notice something powerful. You won't get pulled into every argument. You won't carry every offense. You won't spend hours replaying conversations or predicting confrontations. You'll walk into rooms with confidence because your peace is no longer up for grabs. You're no longer at the mercy of someone else's tone or timing or lack of self-awareness. Instead of managing your anger, you're managing your focus. How? Instead of trying to control people, you're controlling your state. Instead of being easily shaken, you're learning how to stay still. That's not passive. That's not weak. That's leadership. And here's what happens when you become that kind of person. People feel it. They sense your steadiness. Your calm becomes contagious. Your presence sets the tone. You walk into conflict without becoming conflict. You disagree without becoming disagreeable. How? You navigate hard conversations without losing your cool. Not because you've shut off your emotions, but because you've learned how to guide them. This kind of growth doesn't mean you'll never feel angry or bothered again. That's not the goal. The goal is to stop living there, to stop letting that anger drive your behavior, define your relationships, or dictate your day, to stop turning temporary moments into long-term mindsets. How? You can feel the wave come up and still choose not to drown in it. You can notice the trigger and still decide not to pull it. You can recognize the emotion and still respond with wisdom, not just instinct. It's a daily practice, one moment at a time, one conversation at a time. But every time you choose presence over reaction, you rewire a little more peace into your system. You train your nervous system to settle. How? You train your mind to observe. You train your words to be intentional. And the more you practice this, the less reactive you become. Not just with others, but with yourself. You start to trust your ability to stay grounded, even when the world around you isn't. How? And that trust, that inner steadiness, it starts to carry into every area of your life. You stop being thrown off by bad moods, bad emails, bad attitudes. How? You become the thermostat, not the thermometer. You set the emotional tone instead of constantly reacting to it. Because your peace isn't just a gift to yourself, it's a gift to everyone around you. It makes you a better partner, a better parent, a better friend. How? A better leader. And most of all, it makes you free. Free from the need to control. Free from the need to be right. Free from the emotional roller coaster that other people live on every day. You still feel, you still care, you still engage. But now you do it with intention, with clarity, with calm. And that kind of calm, it's not loud. It doesn't need to prove anything. It just walks in and changes the room. Look, the goal isn't to be emotionless. It's to be emotionally aware. Anger will knock, but it doesn't have to move in. You get to decide how much space someone else's words take up in your mind. And when you master that, you stop reacting and you start leading with calm, with clarity, and with control.